Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 3 of Crave Arts Presents The Future of Film, featuring intimate interviews with the best emerging filmmakers from around the world. My name is Tom Oliva, and I am co-founder and executive director of Crave Arts and the All-American High School Film Festival, dedicated to discovering, showcasing, and uniting the next generation of visual storytellers and content creators. Some quick updates from the All-American Bulletin Board as we gear up for our 10th annual festival in New York City. Our 2022 festival takes place October 7th to 9th. Submissions are currently open via Film Freeway, and submitting is free until March 4th. The final deadline is July 1st. Head over to hsfilmfest.com to get the latest news and updates about the 2022 festival, including our 2021 highlight reel, downloadable 2022 event planner, planning guides, and posters. It's never too early to begin planning your All-American adventure. If you plan on attending the fest in New York City, we highly recommend competing in our Film Invitational competitions, the world's premier on-site student filmmaking competitions in New York City. We offer a variety of authentic, real-world production experiences for student filmmakers and video production programs. Your chance to crew up and produce a short film in just 10 weeks. Registration opens in March. And teachers, if you're looking for a great way to boost your curriculum and elevate and inspire your students, check out our video production resource community and roadshow. Two terrific in-person or remote opportunities featuring lesson plans and interactive presentations based on our library of exemplary student films. More information can be found at hsfilmfest.com under our Education tab. All right, time for a very special guest. Today, I am joined by festival alumni from 2013 and 2014, Stephen Boyer, to dig deep into what drives this emerging filmmaker. Stephen holds a special place in All-American history, in part because he won our first ever award for Best Overall Film at our inaugural festival back in 2013, but also because of the symbolic significance his immense and inspiring talent represented. You see, Stephen submitted his early work to our brand new festival while we were still unsure if we could actually build this community. Our grand experiment, a grand gamble to dream bigger and create a deserving home for the world's best emerging filmmakers, was relying on one key ingredient: actually finding exemplary student filmmakers. We knew what All-American could become, but how would we get there? Would we even receive any really good films worth celebrating? There were several nervous months waiting for the first submissions to come in. Then, one night during that first year, reviewing submissions on my laptop, everything changed. A little 5-minute dramatic gem graced my screen. A film so instantly engaging, creative, heartbreaking, honest, and deftly produced was all the proof I needed that our dream had become a reality. I sat there on my couch, unable to hold back my tears. All thanks to a film a 16-year-old filmmaker made. It was brave and moving. Stephen Boyer's film Paradigm is why our festival is entering its 10th year. It is why I am here today hosting this podcast. It is why our thriving community now supports tens of thousands of emerging filmmakers, educators, family, friends, and patrons of the arts all over the world. And 10 years later, Paradigm still has the same impact on me every time I watch it. This little 5-minute film is still a staple of my presentations around the world. Of course, now I know to bring a box of tissues with me whenever I plan to screen it. One of the marvels of any short film is that the viewer doesn't know what world they are entering, who is there, and why. We enter naive and hopeful that what the filmmaker shares on screen will change us and leave its mark. This is where Paradigm, and I should add so many of Stephen's impressive array of productions, excels. The significance of the film's emotive excellence emerges with the title. Paradigm, a typical example or pattern of something, a model. An otherwise broad term becomes immediately devastating through Stephen's capable lens. What we find inside this tight and seemingly flawless story and production is a world shaped by personal experience and an uncanny ability to elevate the elements of film at such a young age. We quickly become immersed in a powerful vignette of two young siblings struggling to understand how their model family has fallen apart. From the perspective of the older but still very young and vulnerable brother, we watch as he tries desperately to help his little sister Lily process a sad reality she never saw coming. We watch overwhelmed with emotion as memories become mountains, the perspective of the children guiding us with an innocence we've lost reluctantly. I simply cannot overstate the sheer power of this film and what it does to the viewer, and Stephen Boyer made that happen at 16 years old. The fact that he wrote the story, directed and edited the film, and composed and performed the original score, an element that also elevates the entire experience, is just icing on the whole, if we build it, will they come, cake. It's that good. I could spend hours praising Stephen's gifts and detailing how his other projects all produce a similar effect, but we're here to meet Stephen, to learn where his inspiration comes from, to learn about his process and ongoing experiences in the industry, to dive deep into this outstanding emerging filmmaker. I am thrilled to be joined by Stephen Boyer today. Welcome, Stephen. It's been a while since we last spoke. How are you?
Wow, yeah. I'm great. Well, first off, any self-confidence issues I've had in the last several months just went out the door, so thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And I do want to mention one thing because it's important. I actually didn't edit Paradigm. My friend Matt Seidner edited Paradigm.
And I've met Matt, and I should know that.
No, it's okay. Well, because you mentioned at the top of this, like you did your intro, and you're doing your 10th festival. So these things, I mean, you've probably watched thousands and thousands of these things. It's all good. But yeah, no, that was a thing where I think emotionally, Matt's a few years older than me, and I think that he was able to, and he's a brilliant editor, and he's now become this excellent commercial editor, and I think that he was able to, at the time, give it, just look at it very objectively, and cut it very objectively in a way that, to be honest, I don't know that I could have done at 16 years old,
Yeah, well, you did a lot of other things very well at 16, so fair enough if there's one piece of the film that you were willing to hand off to someone else. And we're going to talk about collaboration and the importance of collaboration, so I'm glad that you brought that up. If it's okay with you, I'd like to start with something we call personal portrait. It's just like a quick reply exercise to warm us up. I'll say something, a question or a phrase, and you just say the first thing that comes to mind in brief.
Okay.
Ready?
Okay. Yeah.
No pressure. This is
it's like an improv class.
It is. Fun. It's the most awkward thing I do in every interview, but hopefully one that's very real. Okay. So first, inspiration. What fuels you?
The universal hardships that we all go through. I think when somebody. Is this supposed to be like a fast response? I'm sorry.
Yes, it is, but
Yeah. Universal hardships. Like when you're talking to somebody, they're telling a story that's about some problem, and you're like, oh, wow, I've been through that too. That's interesting to me. Collective, just the way that we all process the world, kind of different but similar. That's interesting to me.
I couldn't agree more. Your lens focuses on?
I think growth. Characters that grow, characters that learn stuff. Growth.
Light or dark?
Dark up until the very, very end.
So you. Okay, and this is apropos to what I just said a few minutes ago. Collaboration?
Yes, unquestionably, and almost with complete necessity, yes.
Networking?
Crucial, difficult, necessary. It gets easier as you do it more.
Film school?
Optional, helpful depending on where you go. But you can definitely do your own film school, and I want to talk about that a little bit.
Happiness is?
Getting to wake up every day, and getting to choose what you do with your time and your energy.
Whew, the American dream right there.
Yeah, no, it's perfect for the podcast. All American, yeah.
And that's my last personal portrait question prompt. All American High School Film Festival.
Formative. formative for me at least. Definitely.
All right, cool. I appreciate that. I hope we're all warmed up now.
Yeah, it's great.
Let's just
We'll do zip zap zop next.
There you go. Let's just jump right into it. Where are you right now?
Yeah, so I turned 25 last year, and I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I've been in Los Angeles forever, which I feel very lucky that my dad moved here in the 90s, and I got to grow up here, and I didn't have to go through the whole, I'm leaving town, mom, to go do this kind of thing. I just had to go down the freeway. But yeah, right now I'm about to hit 3 years actually editing, like staff editing at a company that does. We're an ad agency. We do lots of commercials. For about 2 years, I was editing ads for HBO Max. I was doing lots of trailers and promos, which was really pretty fun when that launched. And then this year, I'm trying to get on another feature film as an editor. Last year, I had 2 feature films come out that I edited. I didn't direct them. I just edited them. And they were both horror movies, and they were directed by a team. They're the same directors for both, Justin Powell and David Charbonnet. And they're both horror, and they're both really tight thrillers. And it was their first films too. And I was just one of those kind of stars aligned things. And I got really lucky. And I was on those films for over 2 years. I was on those movies kind of concurrently. One's called The Boy Behind the Door, and one's called The Djinn. I'm an additional editor on The Djinn. That's DJINN. And that for me was a big kind of wake up call of like, I think my way into like feature filmmaking is probably through post. I really like editing. I'd love to direct a feature one day, but it's something that it's more of a one day, thing right now. Whereas editing is very tangible. And I've edited 2 now, or 1.5 is what I say, because I was an additional editor on The Djinn. And I've had legitimate there's legitimate interest, I think, for some projects to potentially do a third one. And so I think that's really been where I've been at in the last few years, has been pivoting more towards editing as my career. But there's an asterisk to that, which is I just bought a camera. I just bought a Blackmagic 6K, and I bought a bunch of cool old Soviet lenses. And I'm going to be I want to make some more shorts this year that I think are just sort of independent and self-financed kind of stuff.
Congratulations on the camera. I know that's a big step. I own 2 Blackmagic cameras, and
they're great.
They're great, and they've been a great partner with us over the years. So thanks
sweet.
for the shout out there.
No, they're amazing. I mean, 10 years ago with Paradigm, like the best thing you could, like, to get a decent cinematic image out of a consumer camera was extremely difficult. And the price barrier was a real price barrier. Mm-hmm. And it's still, these things aren't cheap, it's not nothing, but I think the feasibility of making something that looks really good, has a certain level, the highlights aren't too blown out, the shadows aren't too dark, being able to like get a good, focus and get a nice bokeh and all, like that cinematic look we all sort of associate with movies, is a lot easier to achieve these days. It just is. And I think that's Blackmagic, it's cool that they're sponsoring. They have done so much, I think, to make that like possible for a lot of people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do hear that traveling around the country. I know a lot of schools enjoy that equipment because, the price point again and the quality that you're getting for that. First of all, I'm happy to hear about your success, that you're working in the industry. You seem genuinely happy with what you're doing. You seem genuinely humble about the path. Right. And I think that's something important to talk about, specifically because our audience is emerging filmmakers and educators trying to inspire them and educate them about the career path that they're headed toward. And I knew you as a young man, and I would have said that at that point, you would have had your heart set on being a writer and director. And yet now I'm seeing this new, mature perspective. What was that like for you, sort of realizing that transition, like this is my way in and I'm going to have to be patient? And it's just so interesting that the film we're talking about, you didn't edit and now here you are, a commercial editor. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the mistake sometimes, and it's an understandable way to look at it, is I think people look at it as like, oh, he like settled or he like gave up something, and I mean, first, life's full of compromise, but also I don't really feel that way about it, because basically what happened was when I got to my senior year of film school, I was still kind of planning on directing, and I directed a thesis, but I started to edit way more. I was already like a post-production intern at a commercial place. And I was editing my friends' thesis films. I was editing my friends' projects. And I realized I realized how much fun that was. And, that it was like it was very intuitive to me. I talked to a lot of people who hate editing, and they're just like, oh my God, I can't stand it. Like, I want to just shoot all day, or I want to write. And when I get to editing, it's painful. But for me, I've always been very techie, and I've always been just sort of on my computer all day and obsessed with, very like nerdy things, like obsessed with codecs and compression and intraframe versus interframe and sensor sizes and stuff. So I've always been really into that kind of very techie thing. And so editing, that was kind of how I got, just like interested in some of this stuff, was just like understanding how like digital images work. Right. But then, that skill becomes very transferable to being like an assistant editor and being able to sort through stuff. And I think a lot of because, I was an assistant for a long time for commercial editors. And I think a lot of the commercial editors were very appreciative that I had this eye for pulling selects. Because what you do as an assistant editor is you have to watch hours and hours and hours of footage. And I did a lot of unscripted stuff where it was like, real people react, whatever. So with that, you're looking at like 12 hours of material. And so you have to find those moments that are interesting and are cinematic. And I think if you're a robot about it, it's very hard. But if you have even a little bit of like emotional perception, and you can read people in the way a filmmaker can, it makes your job better. And now, now it's been, once I got to edit a movie, I don't know, it still feels weird saying it sometimes, but once I got to edit a film, like a full feature film for several months, and sit with two directors who were so passionate about it. And it was not it was a horror movie. It's like very intense, very scary. It's about kids in peril. It's like super, super dark. And so going down that route and being an observer and kind of quietly helping in the background, I realized that like, this is really, really fun. And not only is it a way in to get to make movies, but it's a way into a lot of stuff. Editing has opened doors at, and I don't say this with like an ego, I just say it like, it's been exciting. It's opened doors at Netflix and HBO Max and Amazon. And while I'm not editing those shows, I'm editing, the material around those shows. And I think that is in itself, like as a job, as a day job, is like really fun and really interesting. And, it can get repetitive. Sure, I've cut a zillion promos that all the same way sometimes, but I think that at a certain point, like your economic needs come up, and editing for the most part, a lot of people will tell you like that's a great way to sort of stay creative and stay working, and to pay your bills, to be candid.
Yeah, no, and you're not editing shows for those networks yet.
I'd love to. I just got on the IATSE Local 700 roster, so I can take a union gig if I get offered one. That was months and months of paperwork to get on. It's quite a bit of work actually, but I won't bore you with.
Well, I can imagine, but it's clear that you're shooting your shots so that when opportunities do arise, that you're ready. And I have no doubt that you will be. First of all, I know from my industry experience that in many ways, especially on commercial projects and reality stuff, the editors are the ones really telling the story. They're out there just capturing as much as possible, and then you are responsible for telling the story. And it's a little different, I'm sure, on scripted stuff, but at the same time, you have a major role in how that story is told. So I can see the parallel there, and I'm sure that creative piece of it really does help fuel you. Did your early work as a director and writer, and I know that you're still working on that stuff now, does that influence your editing? And how did the two kind of merge in a beneficial way?
I think and not to sound like a cop-out answer, I think everything influences editing. Like, I really think that, like, your whole life experience, like, influences how you edit, because I feel like a lot of editing is, like, 80% of it's just, like, watching footage and pulling selects and finding interesting moments. And I think that what makes something interesting is really the most subjective thing ever. And so a lot of that does just come from, like, yeah, of course, like, early stuff. And I mean, you know what it helps me with is being sympathetic with directors, because I have watched directors seriously struggle. I've watched and this is on short film stuff too, and commercial. Like, I've watched directors just, pull their hair out at their stuff. I've watched directors have their bank balance hit zero, and they show me on their phone, and they're like, "Hey, look, this project's really going to kill me." And I'm like, "Oh my God." Like, I think being, knowing the sort of fire and knowing the drive and the commitment it takes to direct something, I think as an editor, it just makes me very sympathetic to the process and very sort of giving in many ways. I think if you were to ask a lot of the directors I've cut for, they'd all say, like, "Oh yeah, Steven's just like, he's always there. He's always helping out." And I think part of that's just because, like, I get it. I haven't cut, like, some big studio movie where everyone's making crazy money and it's a different story, but everything I've done has been, for the most part, the directors had, like, a serious stake in it. And I've also done a lot of projects where by the end of it, the director would forfeit their pay so that they could get more visual effects shots. They could get, an extra day with a colorist or whatever they needed in post. I've watched that happen too. So I think knowing how much you have to give to a project as a filmmaker does make me more, like, sensitive with directors. And I think, maybe on some level they trust me more.
Yeah, that answer makes me very happy that I asked the question, because I think that's really insightful for folks who are, emerging and coming up. And it's a true glimpse of the world. And I think sometimes people confuse the chain of command, and there's a lot of sacrifice at the top, probably more. You have to pay the people whose project it isn't.
Yes.
And sometimes you are the one sacrificing, but for good reason, to share that story that's so important to you. One thing that you just absolutely love about editing, while we're on the subject, and one thing that is your nemesis.
I think I'll start with the negative and then go positive. I think the hardest thing with editing is how much is left up to interpretation. Something that happens a lot with editing, especially I find this with trailers and commercials, trailers especially, is like they see your work and they're like, "We love your stuff. Like, your stuff's great. Like, we just want to see, like, the Steven take, we want to see how you take it." And they'll give you, like, a week with the footage,
I do that a lot to people. I know.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, we love your voice and your style, and we love what you did for this project. And yeah, just take the footage and just, here's kind of the tone we want. But, and then, you'll take every word of what they say and really try to figure it out and go run with it for a week. And then you come back and it's like, yeah, so, we have some notes, and it's like 5-paragraph essay.
Why didn't you just tell me that in the beginning?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, look, I don't necessarily, I fault people when it happens more than once, but I think the first time that happens, a lot of it is actually pretty innocent. It's kind of like a client wanting to be, like, wanting to be the cool client and wanting to let you run with it. And maybe that worked on the last thing they did. And, you have to have some empathy for the client as well. But, I think the way around that, and it's harder these days, and people are sometimes resistant to do it just creatively, but I think the way around that is to just have the director sit with you while you cut. And this is something a lot of editors have strong feelings on that, or like, I want to do the first cut alone. I want to do this alone. I just don't care. I just don't care at all. I grew up, I came up working in post houses with, like, multiple people over my shoulder, with editors over my shoulder, with money people over my shoulder, and ad people over my, like, I'm so used to just, like, being, in the timeline with literally, like, 3 or 4 people around me. So the idea of, like, cutting something with the director next to me is not a big deal to me, and it saves you so much time. I just had a phone call. I had an interview actually recently for hopefully to cut a movie, and the director was like very nervous to ask me that. He's like, are you sure? Like I really want to be like there the whole time so that we don't waste time, because it's an indie film and there's not a lot of money, and he's like, I don't want to waste time. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. He's like, oh, because a lot of editors are sensitive about that. I'm like, it's fine. Just come to my place. I have a couch. We have a TV. We can hook it all up. Like, I'd rather you just watch me cut, and you can be on, you can be doing other director things while I'm cutting. And then there's nothing lost in that translation. There's no me running off for a week and coming back and you being like, what did you do to my movie? And I think the thing I love most about it is collaboration, is working with directors, seeing them excited, obviously. And then what was really cool on like Boy Behind the Door was getting to like spot the movie with like a composer. And we had this guy, Anton Senko, who's an amazing like composer. And I mean, like Anton, I don't hope he doesn't, like, I don't want to call him like old or something, but like, he was working on movies like long before I was born. The guy was playing on huge studio sessions, and so it was like, and the directors were pretty young as well. They were in like, early 30s. And so I think that like, it was really nice for us to like sit down with this guy who had been in the game and spot the film. And he just had so many brilliant ideas. And like that process is really, really exciting, and when you first get the cue back from the composer and it's like, oh man, this movie slaps now, like that's nice. Seeing what the sound designers did. We had the sound, our sound designer was on the sound team for like Kong Skull Island, he had done some amazing stuff, and, sitting in his studio and talking through the movie, like that process is just the coolest. We had the colorist, this guy Luke Cahill, who was the colorist on like Tangerine, that indie film. All of this to say, like, just that, like, getting to sort of sit with those guys for a few days and watch what they could bring to a movie that I'd been looking at for almost 2 years, as had the directors. That was really rewarding.
You just illuminated what makes this podcast important, and I hope special. And it's that the answer to a question about being an editor, I would think, or I think a lot of people would assume, it has something to do with just being alone and isolated and like sitting in front of a screen and just grinding it out. And you just said that the best part is collaboration, and then described many examples of that. So that's awesome to know. I'm sure it does have moments of isolation and loneliness and so many. But you're able to see the lemonade, right? And that makes getting through the lemon part a little bit easier. That's really insightful.
And I want to say too, it depends on the project. Like there are some projects where like it's just like you just send it off and you have a phone call briefly and they send it and they send it back and that's it. Yeah. But I think for feature films and I really think anything where you're telling a story over more than 60 seconds, like you need to have at least a couple of spotting sessions where you're sitting down and you're looking at each beat of you need that. You really need that. Unless you're all just like, you've done a zillion things together. It's right. I think once it goes beyond the like promo world, it's really important.
I want to go back and then kind of work back to this place where you are now. But one last question, since you brought it up and I wanted to bring it up because it's on everyone's mind. And I don't know, maybe there's a parent listening somewhere whose, son or daughter wants to be an editor and they're like, I don't know, is this really a viable career option? And I fight. That's literally like a huge part of what I do with this organization is fighting for those young people so that their parents go, actually, this is a great idea. It's way better than things that I thought were relevant when I was young. How is the money?
It fluctuates. I mean, so it fluctuates. I'm very lucky to be staffed at a place now that is sort of consistent. But, at the same time, I've been editing for 7 years, roughly professionally. And I have my own place, but I want to put this in terms that aren't numerical, but basically I still have to save like a full year or two to like take a vacation. Like I still have to be really smart with my monthly budget. I still have to hit a certain thing a lot. I still use coupons. Like it's still, no, like it just,
it's great.
like,
I do too.
I'm very aware that like I'm lucky to do this and have a job and have a place in Los Angeles, which is expensive to live. But like, there's still quite a bit of financial sacrifices each month along the way. I still have a big dent in my car that I just haven't bothered paying off because it's a cosmetic thing, and it's like it would be several grand to fix it, and it's like, well, it's just like so there are still like it's not like it's not like you can do anything, but it is decent. And I will say like editing more than a lot of things, like editing and sound, it's maybe the first year or two will be you're gonna have to have roommates and stuff, but I think after a while, like you can definitely like if you staff up or if you are regularly working on commercial stuff, like you can do pretty well in it. And I certainly know a lot of guys making way more who actually tell me a lot that they're like we have like conversations where they're like, oh, you could totally charge like double what you're charging. And I'm like, really? And they're like, oh yeah, like it's fine. So I think sometimes I'm skittish because I want the gig, but then I've learned there's like a weird psychology to like charging more, and then somebody's like, oh, he's worth more, even if like you kind of made that number up. It's a very bizarre thing that like you learn of over time. But,
and you're in the middle of I would imagine, that sort of transition, and that's part of paying your dues. And I think what I'm hearing though is, obviously it's, you're not like flush with cash and like living some sort of dream life, but at the same time.
Oh, and I want to emphasize the Black Magic, that was a massive chunk of savings. Like that was a extremely calculated, like several days of looking at spreadsheets and numbers and like that was a long, many phone calls decision.
Well earned. Yeah. But what I'm hearing, and I have the privilege of being able to see your voice and you're smiling and your eyes light up. What I'm hearing is that it really doesn't matter because you're doing something that you really enjoy, and it's worth kind of going through the process and making your way, and you will be rewarded. I have absolutely no doubt, because I've seen it time and time again. If you're passionate about it, if you enjoy the work, if you do a good job, you value the relationships and the collaboration, it's just a matter of time before you're in a very comfortable place doing something that you love, and that's the process. And that's a great segue to my next point of questioning, which is, when did you first start making movies, and why?
Yeah. Honestly, like it's like I was like making short films that were edited and complete and not good, but like putting them together. They were cut together and you could somewhat follow them. When I was like 10, I mean, I was very young. I was in 5th grade, 6th grade, playing with like a video camera.
Why did you want to do that?
It just seemed really fun, and I would listen to. So my dad's a composer, and I grew up listening to film music, all day. I mean, he's been an orchestrator on a lot of really amazing movies. And so I would just, film music and film sort of rhythm was part of my just listening culture. Some people grew up listening to, this kind of music or that. Film scores, that was it. And so I just naturally thought about things in that way. And I thought about things in terms of like how they came together, like how they sunk together, like visual and sound. And then, part of it was, the first things I did for many, many years, and even in high school, was like copying. You just like, I remember we did like I'd watch like a CSI show with my mom all the time. And eventually I just made my own like episode of a CSI show with my 10-year-old friends, because like part of it's just imitation for a very long time, just to get, I feel like that's critical. And people sometimes look down on like a young filmmaker doing a lot of copying or doing a lot of references or homage, but you got to realize like that's the way to like learn for a while. I can tell you, even in film school, at like guys older than me and at a much more senior level, like the way a lot of people learned cinematography there was they'd pick a shot from a film they really loved and they would try to recreate it. And I mean like recreate it, like recreate the little glimmer on the eye and the face, like really, because when you get to that detail of copying, then you're like, oh, that's how they did
exactly.
it. Okay.
Yep.
So that's a big part of it. So yeah, I think I was just making it for fun and for, you know, kind of my friends, to be honest. I don't really have, like, there wasn't some big spiritual thing to it, but that came later. That came later with just like, I think I realized like that was the way I could communicate how I felt about the world and how I saw things. You know, some people do it through music or poetry or social media to an extent. And, you know, to me, it was like, okay, I can make like, you know, I can make a couple of minutes of something that you watch. And I was always very aware that people watched things alone. I was always very aware that people watch things, you know, in the dark on their laptop or on their phone. And in high school, I was very conscious of that. And so I think knowing that that's a very like, that's a place where you can be a little more vulnerable.
And you went from that, and it makes perfect sense. And I recommend that path to anyone. The problem is when that path becomes the focus long term, right? When you are literally just imitating to imitate.
Right.
And that I get a lot of those. And unfortunately, they're not good because they don't have the heart and soul of the creator in them. But I absolutely understand it as a way to get to where you want to go. So then how...
It's a great exercise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how does that work then translate to something like Paradigm, which, I mean, I'm not like messing around when I praise that film. It is an anomaly.
So
it is, and I know you know that, and I know in the past we've talked about how like it's probably almost frustrating, like this film that you made like has defined you for someone like me. Yeah,
problem. Yes,
yeah,
sure.
but
there's a little bit of
it's
that.
It's just this tight, beautiful, sad story, and what really makes it special is how all of the elements come together, and that's sort of the hallmark of our most successful student filmmakers, that understanding how everything comes together. But the creativity of it also astounds me. The fact that it's told from the perspective of the brother trying to protect his little sister, and that it's all showing. You know, there's not a whole lot of emotional, you know, monologues or anything like that. How did you get there?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a while back, but I do remember, I remember watching a lot of short films on Vimeo, and I remember I was really into short films where people would have a conversation, but then that conversation would be, you wouldn't really see much of the talking, the mouths moving, but you would see a lot of this symbolic, visual representation of these ideas. And they were all very like ethereal and spiritual. And I feel like we, you know, a lot of films, especially shorts, get very caught up in like the linear progression of things. And I think that's, you know, that's fine sometimes, you know, but I think, I mean, just personally, and this is just, we're getting into like taste and preference and stuff, but for me, I mean, I don't think about my life very linearly at all. And I think about, you know, if I'm going to think about like for example, like a relationship I had with somebody, like a romantic relationship, I don't necessarily think about it like I met them. And then this is like, I think about these moments that are very pronounced, that are very intense, good or bad. And I think it's kind of this big tapestry of like these different images, really, these different feelings. And so Paradigm, it's super nonlinear. It just jumps around a lot. And I think I was also really interested in exploring, and I've always been interested, and I still am, you know, creatively, like in how characters will go through something and see things completely differently. So with Paradigm, like the first, you know, you say it's from the brother's perspective, and it is in the end, but at the beginning, like it's with her the whole time, and it's about like a time machine, and it's like very innocent, it's very sweet, and we see all these shots of the parents happy together, and it's like, oh, mom and dad were happy, we were happy, everything was great. Like, I don't understand why they're getting divorced, you know? And then we see all those same moments again, but from one more angle. And there's a much more, there's stuff that you didn't see, that the little girl, the 6-year-old girl didn't see, that the kid who's 10 or 9 or, I forget the exact age in the movie, but you know, he sees stuff, he saw a glance, he saw a weird look between mom and dad that maybe she was just too young to get. And I think that's, you know, at the risk of getting like too sad about that kind of thing, I think that's interesting when you look back at life. And I think we do this a lot with history and stuff, especially like, I think in the last few years, a lot of people were like, hey, maybe that wasn't the good old days. Like, maybe that wasn't great. And I'm really interested in that idea. I'm really interested in like looking back on something with fresh eyes, whether it's about yourself or people in your family or even just like a movie. I mean, God, it's so interesting to me watching like a movie that I was like obsessed with as like a 13-year-old boy. And now I watch it, I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe we just got to leave that with that summer and we're good.
Wait till you're my age. It's everything is amplified by experience and perspective. But you never stop loving those pieces that inspired you back then. It's fascinating.
They're formative.
I was going to ask you when we were talking about editing, if you now see life sometimes as an editor, and I know the answer is yes. Right.
I do. And actually I think about that a lot. Like I think about, I'm trying to put something together now that's kind of just, we talked about money, and it's like moments of like a character, and I'm hesitant because I don't want to like say it and not put it out, but we'll see. But like, I'm interested in like how threads connect, threads connect, sorry, can I like rephrase?
You can absolutely.
Edit this, right? Okay. Can you ask the question again? I'm sorry.
If you see, it happens to me all the time.
Okay.
If you see life as an editor now.
I definitely do. And I think I do see life as I must say, as an experimental nonlinear editor. Because I do think there are, what I've noticed a lot is like patterns. So I physically moved addresses like 6 times in the last few years because of various financial things and breakups and all this stuff. So it like when you go through like a big transition like that so many times next to each other within a couple years, you see these patterns. And I kind of like, I thought about it like, wow, like, I could pack in this thing again and pack in this box again and pack in this kitchen up again. And I thought, man, like, yeah, like that's, you could totally cut this all together. Like if you shot this in a certain way and you used to, so I definitely think about things, in the sense that like, I see my life as almost a series of patterns now. And sometimes, on like a therapy level, you want to like, you see a negative pattern. You're like, I gotta break this pattern. Like I keep repeating this and I've been repeating it for, 5 years. And like, I gotta get out of that. And so I think that that's part of it too. Sometimes pattern recognition can drive you nuts, but sometimes it can actually be very like helpful to be like, oh, like I have made the same mistake so many times. Let's not do it next time,
Yeah. And it's certainly a worthy practice for someone who is interested in storytelling for a living. So it makes perfect sense. And I think that's great advice for our community. I want to keep working through, I want to keep talking to you forever. I'll start with that. But in the interest...
We can do a 3-hour, we can go like full...
Marathon cast.
Yeah. I don't care, man. Let's go.
In the interest of working through, why film school for you?
Sorry, you cut out. What did you say?
I'm sorry. In the interest of working through, your process of getting to where you are today, from where I knew you all the way back in 2013, which is just wild. This is very nostalgic for me. Why film school?
So I think for me, film school, I grew up in LA, and so there was just naturally a lot around. But, I think, and I feel differently about this. I graduated 4 years ago, so I feel differently about this now. But I think at the time it was a way to legitimize something that felt like it could be perceived as illegitimate or unstable or a fluke or something like that. And so I think, and this was just a mindset thing at the time, was just like, I needed like an institutional thing to justify this very non-structured, unstructured thing that I wanted to do. I feel very differently about that now. If I'm going to be honest about film school now, I think that really what you pay for, what you do is I think you pay for the opportunity to make stuff in a risk-free environment, right? So there's 2 parts of it. So that's the first part, is that you are, if I want to go experiment and make something that's really like inspired by like European art house films or something, then it's really hard for somebody to get like the money to do that. And maybe if you do that, they might not be into it, and then you've jeopardized a financial relationship and a client relationship. It's really hard to experiment as a professional, to be perfectly honest. But in film school, that's encouraged, and you should. And you have this kind of world where it's sort of safe to fail. And I think a lot of stuff in film school, like, I mean, a lot of my friends, and I did this too, like we put so much pressure on ourselves to make like this amazing short film. And in retrospect, we probably should have just tried more weird stuff, because I think that was the space to do it. So I think that's a big part of what you pay for, is the opportunity to make your own. It's a bit of a sandbox, but I think also you pay for the network. I mean, one of my best friends is this guy I went to school with, and his name's Eli Di Fiore, and he's an amazing cinematographer. He shot pretty much everything I did in film school. And, he and I still work together, and there are gigs where he's shooting it and he puts my name in and I've gotten it, and vice versa for cinematography. I've gotten him plenty of work. I'm actually borrowing his lens right now. And so, like we help each other out, and that's a very like positive thing I got out of that. I can also I don't want to go into it now because it's a bunch of steps and a bunch of people, but I can trace getting the feature film to the film school.
Right.
Like there is a direct, like I worked for this guy, I interned for him, I was her assistant, and then bam, it goes there in a weird, windy way. So I think, that's kind of what you're getting out of it. The classes are helpful. I do think a lot of film school classes focus way too much on like American cinema. And I think like I am discovering, European films and French films and Russian. I'm obsessed with Russian movies. I have Russian lenses. I mean, like I'm all about this stuff. And like I'm discovering all of that now, many years after film school, and looking back at me like, man, I kind of wish I wish I watched a Tarkovsky movie, things like that. So, you'll get what you get out of the classes. Everyone's different. But really you're paying for the opportunity to practice, and you're paying for hopefully a good network of people.
Well, it's an honest answer, and it certainly sounds like a worthwhile experience for you. Is there any special reason why you chose the school that you did? That might be helpful for our community.
Yeah. So I graduated from, Hushin College, which was formerly called Studio School, which was formerly called Relativity School, and that's not a joke. So it was Relativity when I went, and so it was for me. It was local. It was new, and so there was just a lot more opportunity. I think at a bigger institutional school that's been around for decades, you gotta there's way more like ranks, and you gotta kind of do way more grunt work and all that. And trust me, I did plenty of grunt work at college. But it was a smaller, group. I mean, the graduating class of filmmakers was like 7 people.
Wow.
And so we knew each other extremely well. And there was a lot of, resources to go around, like literally like gear, stages, people, just, locations, like, hey, you've got a car. Can you move the equipment this day? It was very practical. But I think having just such a small pool was helpful. And then beyond that, it was just and I still feel this way. I think that they are way more in the realm of like in the mindset of like just make stuff, and we'll be very critical about how we make it, and the way we talk about it, and we'll do a lot of peer review, but just make stuff. There's not a lot of theory. There's not a lot of and that's not an insult to them. Like, I think it's good to just like go full steam ahead and make a bunch of stuff every year,
And a lot of schools are pivoting to that model, and because it makes sense. And I talk to a lot of those schools, and I talk to a lot of schools that are still using a more traditional model. And, because of what I do, they're asking me, how do we get to a point where we're doing something that's actually useful for these students coming out of high school, because they're all coming out and they already know the stuff that we're teaching in year 1 and year 2. So that's why, you went to a school that had this fresh model, and it certainly seems to have paid off. How would you describe your style as a filmmaker when you were younger and the work that,
Yeah.
I mean, part of this is we're going to put some links with
Sure,
the podcast that so folks can watch this film Paradigm that I keep going on and on about.
Yeah. By the way, I want to, and I'll say this here, and I don't know when I will be done with it, so don't hound me about it. But I am actually working on like a remaster of it. It's the same movie, it's the same everything, but I did the post on that movie when I was like 16, and so I am working on like redoing the color correction and re-recording some of the score and redoing like the sound mix and cleaning up the dialogue. Like I actually am working on it and I'm getting some cool people who worked on the features with me just to kind of help with like, hey, can you help this? Can you do this for a day? Can you do one pass at this little movie? So I am actually trying to put that together like a full on, just like it's the same movie. Nothing's going to change, but like it will look and sound, I think, a little more polished and a little more like, oh, okay, like this is like a modern short as opposed to like something finished on a MacBook.
Well, I can't wait to see it. And I hope, and I will be patient. I understand how busy things can get, but please send that my way when it is complete. And I think it's, the movie's worth it. So,
I felt like, I was like going like, I was looking back my old stuff because during the beginning of COVID, no one was making anything. And I was like, wonder if I could. So I looked at Paradigm and I was like, man, yeah, like I love the movie. It's special to me, but I was also like, just on my very critical technical post-production level, I was like, I could finish this a little better. Like I could do the sound, I could do the color, like I could do it all like a little nicer. And I think it was just that. And I have all the negatives, or not negatives, sorry. I have all the raw footage. So I can, I was like, okay, I can redo this,
That's basically the question I'm asking. And maybe you just answered it, but how have you changed from the work that people are going to look at that you made in high school to the person that I'm sitting here talking to today? And I was kind of structuring it with style, but it doesn't have to be about style. It can just be about work ethic or attitude.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you with work ethic, I mean, I think I was working just as hard in high school, to be honest. Like I was very industrious and maybe regretfully didn't go to too many parties. But the work ethic's the same, but I think for me, like, there's a realness and a bit, a bit of a coldness to the way I approach stuff now. Not that I am difficult to work with or anything, but I think, when you've made, and I don't say this like I've directed, but like worked on set, edited, whatever. When you've made literally like probably 100 projects in the last, like short film projects in the last 7 or 8 years, like, you're just a little more like, you're a little less eager to like, just like jump into that thing. It's more of like, there's a little more of like a calculated, like, okay, like I want to like really make something that's good and really is sort of that you don't look back on and cringe. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of it. And then, I think my outlook's really different as many people have a different outlook these days. I mean, I think, I was making very squeaky clean, family-friendly things back then. And I think there was an insecurity and there was an anxiety about, I wanted to make everything that was sort of a crowd pleaser, if that makes sense. Like I didn't want anything to be too dark or upset anybody or be like, oh, like that's a topic that's too much. And so I think these days I just don't feel that insecurity anymore. Part of that's just, living on your own and being a grown up and kind of taking care of yourself. And you realize, how much you've lived for other people, et cetera, et cetera. We've all heard that. But I think, with filmmaking, it's like the stuff I make next is hopefully more, I mean, I still want to like make things that people enjoy. I don't want to make, a bunch of like, just, weird, hard to understand things that nobody likes. But I do have like a little more of like, okay, like I'm not scared to go dark now. I'm not scared to have a character that makes questionable decisions. I'm not scared to have like moral gray areas in my storytelling. And I think my taste has changed. I mean, God, like you could not get me to watch like a foreign black and white film when I was 16. And now that's like all I watch.
Yeah. You can't get enough.
It's like almost all I watch. And I watch like a modern, super, big budget thing. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't hit the same. Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a sweet guy, but he was saying like, he's like, yeah, I don't know that movies are cool anymore. I was like, I think they're the same. I actually think you're just like 30.
Yeah,
you know?
you are different. They are the same.
You are different. They're largely the same.
Your patience evolves, your perspective evolves based on your experience, and it's the same thing with a lot of things in life, right? Your taste buds evolve, and you're more interested in trying new and exotic things instead of eating hot dogs and chicken fingers every day.
Yeah, and I think that's the best thing to do is to like lean into that, like really lean into that, because I think. One thing, and I don't want to like rant or anything, but like one thing I hear so much and it drives me nuts is people are just like, oh, like movies are just lame these days, or just like, I just don't like modern movies anymore, or like, I just feel like I've seen everything that's like, gonna really wow me. And it's like, you could not be more wrong. You just could not be more wrong, because I think if you look like, look outside your language, right? Look at stuff that is from other countries, but then you can even go more than that. Like look at film, like find the most influential Soviet films from the 40s to the 70s, and like I guarantee you will find some stuff that will blow your mind. Same with French films. And it's just, and Chinese films and all this stuff. Like there's so much out there, and it's actually wonderful. It's like wonderful to know that I will never see every great movie. That there's always a new, amazing thing that I have yet to discover in the world of cinema, because we've been doing this for 100 years in 100 countries, and it's like. You will never run out of great stuff. You just won't. And then every year there's more stuff too. Every year there's more stuff. They made like so many movies in the last year, despite all of the restrictions and all of the rules. And there's still, Sundance is still a full lineup and had tons of rejections. So like they're still making them. You'll never run out of stuff. And I think part of it's a perspective of just like, hey, maybe the stuff I enjoy now is going to be different, and it's going to be darker, and it's going to be more mature, and that's part of life.
I've had the same experience. It has been equally fulfilling, exploring things beyond my understanding. I love any foreign cinema because it makes the world a smaller place. It lets me travel. But I ultimately, it's the same thing that you said all the way at the beginning of this conversation, which is you're studying people, and you're realizing that we're not as different as we might think, and that cinema as the vehicle for that is the best communicator there is. And it's why I love doing what I do. Yeah, please.
Can I add to that? Because like I watched this. It's a Russian film from 1967 called July Rain. It's very very small thing, but it's so funny. I watched this movie, and it's about this girl who's like 27, and she lives with her mom, and she has this boyfriend, and they don't know if they're going to get married or not, and people want them to get married, but she kind of wants to be independent, and she's got these friends that are really pretentious, and it's like you've seen this movie set in New York, you've seen this movie set in LA or whatever, you've seen this film as a modern American indie many, many times and by many kinds of voices. And it's so interesting. You watch this movie that's set in like 60s Moscow, and it's like, whoa, it's the same thing. We've been telling the same story. This movie is over half a century old, and yet this character and her journey feels like every, female lead in an indie film I've seen in like the last decade. It's crazy to watch that. And it kind of blew my mind. I was just like, wow, like, everything's changed, but nothing's changed,
The walls have gone up, the walls have come down. Within those walls, we're really all the same. That's power. Just because there's someone listening to this, I really, really hope there's someone listening to this and they're like, wow, he's so passionate about Russian films. I have to check them out. I hope there's many people, because it's certainly worth it. Where do you find these foreign films? What's your process for finding them? And I'm actually interested for myself.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like some of them is like recommendations from friends. Having artsy friends is nice. But then, honestly, like July Rain, for example, like a lot of these things I found on Letterboxd. Like Letterboxd is great. Letterboxd is, I deleted all my social media about a year and a half ago for a number of reasons, but I still have a Letterboxd account. And it's so, I've just found so many things through that. And, you can build like this watch list, and and anytime I'm like, oh, I want to watch a movie tonight, I can pull up, 100 things that I haven't seen. And you can even I sort it by length. So everything at the top's like 90 minutes, and then you can scroll down to like the 3.5 hour films. And so it kind of, I do that. I pick like the one, I'm like, okay, I'm in for I could do like a 2-hour thing tonight. And so Letterboxd is phenomenal for that. And if you look at like people's lists and people's best ofs, and I'm sure there's a lot of best, here's the best Bergman film, because Bergman made like so many movies. Like maybe you don't have time for everything, but it's like, okay, here are 5 Bergman films that are really amazing. Start here kind of thing. Yeah. It's so good for that. So Letterboxd is it. And then in terms of watching it, it varies on the movie. Sometimes, to be perfectly honest, I rent a lot of the stuff I watch. A lot of the stuff I want to watch is just not available any other way except to just pay the $2 to rent it on iTunes. But I know that Criterion Channel is great for that. That's a monthly thing. I think that's $10 or $15, and that's the most curated you can get. And then there's a service that I've used a couple times on and off called Mubi, MUBI, which is it's curated, and I think they have a new movie every day or every week. They add in something, and things fall off, so something might be on for 6 months and then go away. But it's curated by human beings. It's not an algorithm. It's a bunch of editors that and editors in the sort of traditional sense of they're curating what comes on this platform, and they have great sort of context, and this movie meant this at this time in this country, and it meant it was subversive because of XYZ. It's really great at sort of understanding historical context behind stuff. So I think those are the avenues. So Letterboxd, Criterion Channel, Mubi, these are good things.
It's a great resource. I'm glad I asked the question. So
sure,
we're close to time here, and again, I could talk to you for a long time. I think, and I've said this to others, perhaps we can find a way to get you back on this show, because I think that we've barely scratched the surface of how your experiences and how your passion for this industry can benefit our community. We've barely touched that, but I want to bring up one thing as a way to sort of wrap here. Sure. I usually end with just talking about, your All-American High School Film Festival experience. I know we don't have to advertise to anyone who's listening to this show, because they wouldn't be listening.
They're already listening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do want, I do want the students who are listening to understand the value of the experience, because without them, there's no point for us doing it, right? I just, there's a story that Andrew, the other founder of the festival, and I have talked about since that first year. And he said that we had a little red carpet. Now we've got a 40-footer. We just had this little thing back then, and we were doing our best to make this thing possible. And he said that you were talking to him on the little red carpet, and you said something like, you were smiling ear to ear, and I remember that distinctly from that weekend in October.
Stoked.
Yeah, and you said something along the lines of, "This means so much to me because I came from a place where I was just like a filmmaker doing this on my own, and I didn't really know anyone else who was doing this for the most part. And then I came here, and I realized that there is this much broader community." And it's been the greatest weekend of my life, or something like that. And we have carried that with us through all of the spreadsheets, through all of the failed sponsorship campaigns, through anything that was tedious and didn't feel like the good parts of pursuing our passion for bringing this community together. I really have carried that with me. And I think about it often. What was meaningful about, not the recognition you received? I know that's part of it, but more about just being there. And, I know you don't think about it all the time, but is it still part of your journey?
Absolutely. Formative was the word I used. It was, what was really just crazy for me is putting a real face to at that time, very online world. And, on a larger level, I feel like we're really online now, more than we were back then. And this isn't to be doomsday about it or anything, but it is really hard to create that personal connection with stuff. And so I think for me, just meeting a bunch of people who were like me, like me but not like me, we were doing the same thing, but we came from different worlds. And then that was the really special part of it. And just really just knowing that I wasn't alone in this. Obviously I had tons of friends that helped me out making stuff in high school, like amazing friends, amazing teachers and everything. But, just being like, oh, like there's a lot of like basically every high school around the country and probably the world, there's some, sort of nerdy kid making movies who wants to do this. And I think that was a relief in a way. It was intimidating, but it was also a relief because it was like, oh, okay, like this isn't like, I'm not a crazy person making this stuff in a vacuum. Like this is actually like a community. There's a conversation. There's a back and forth. And I watched so many other people's movies that weekend, and it was so wonderful to sort of see like, okay, like this is the game. Like this is where we're all at. Like there's some really amazing artists here, and so humbling, exciting, intimidating, all that stuff. It was a mix of emotions, but I think it's just that feeling you get of like, okay, I'm actually like, I'm not alone. I'm part of a bigger world. Very cinematic idea, but it is nice. And I think that meant a lot to me, and I've carried that. And there's people there's people I met that weekend that I still talk to. There's maybe people that now that I'm thinking about it, I should talk to that it's been a few years, and that's on me. But it was an amazing opening of a lot of doors.
Oh, that means a lot for me to hear. That's why I do what I do. And I'm grateful for you being the person that helped usher in another 9 years and running here. And that connection will never be lost on me. With the little bit of time we have left, what advice do you have for the younger version, the younger Stephen Boyer who's 16, 17, submitting to our festival this year for the first time, or maybe hesitating to submit? What do they need to know?
Yeah, it's good, and there's a lot you could say, but I think the big thing is, don't be too focused on the results of what you're doing right now. I think that the biggest thing I had to learn for many years, and still am, is that like perfectionism will just prevent you from doing anything meaningful. And so we all want to make that perfect, beautiful short that wins lots of awards. And I got, for whatever stars aligned reason that I will never understand, I got extremely lucky with that. And I'm very grateful for that. But at the same time, Paradigm is one short I made in the last 10 years. There are, I don't know, 15 other shorts I directed, and like I said, maybe 100 I worked on. So that one I got very lucky, and I'm very proud of that. But there's a lot of other stuff I made that I've made some stinkers, Tom. Mm-hmm. I've made some bad, even after Paradigm, especially after Paradigm, I made some. Yeah. So, I think that you just have to treat it as part of a process, and you have to like actually making the thing and go after, improving your skill set as a filmmaker, as an artist, improving your mind intellectually in terms of the kind of stuff that you take in and the kind of stuff that you are inspired by, and really avoid focusing on awards, avoid focusing on this, I have to get this meeting with this guy, I have to impress this person. That stuff is important and will come naturally, and there'll be a lot of people around you who will encourage that, and don't ignore it, but don't let it be the focus of what you're doing. As you get older, that becomes more of the focus. Mm-hmm. And it's harder to hold on to like the more sort of spiritual side of all this. It's harder to to hold on to that. But really, if you're just starting out, if you're in high school, even if you're, in middle school, I just focus on making really good stuff and making stuff that speaks to you. And just because it might not appeal to your parents, or even it might not even appeal to your community at large, it's okay, because if it means something to you on like a deep level, the world is complex and intricate enough that it probably means something to other people on a deep level. And maybe you are the only voice in the room saying that, and that's okay. And just like, don't be scared to like do that.
I'm glad I asked. Great advice. It's funny. I'm sitting here listening to what you're saying, and I'm like, it's actually, a metaphor for even running my organization. It's the same. Sure. It's the same stuff. You have to go with your heart, and you have to trust, and just keep doing. And it isn't about recognition. It's nice when it comes.
Yeah, it is. And like, but I still feel weird about it.
Yeah, so do I.
Like all that stuff you said at the beginning that was like so insanely complimentary. Like I almost was like nervous. I was like, oh God, now I gotta like, people are gonna watch
live
it.
Live up to this.
And they might not, they'll be like, what the hell is this short? It's like 5 minutes. I just in a blanket for it. Like, those just like, I hear that and I'm like, oh God, okay. Now there's a precedent. Actually, of an extremely great artist that I got to work with. His name's Max Berman. You can look him up. He's an incredible VFX artist, runs a company now. And he said that something like ambition is directly tied to like disappointment or something like that. And his point was not to be sad about it. His point was just like, you just have to like get up every morning and do this. That's it,
I'm glad you do. Last thing, and I know it's extensive, so I'm just going to ask you to name one or two films that are on your radar, on your playlist right now. If you were recommending someone who's listening to watch something, what would it be?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Cinema Paradiso, if you're trying to get into foreign films, that's like a great first foreign film.
It is.
I mean, a lot of people saw Parasite, which was really great because for a lot of people that was like their first film with subtitles. But Cinema Paradiso is a great one because it's about movies. It's so warm and wonderful and happy and beautiful. And then I think my favorite movie ever is like 2001, which is a little challenging to get through sometimes, I'll admit. But like, I love 2001. I think it's amazing.
Ditto.
And then I want to hear your deep cut too, because we talked about foreign cinema. So I'll tell you my like deep cut movie that I'm like, damn, this is a great film, is a Russian film from 1957 called The Cranes Are Flying. It's a beautiful movie set against the backdrop of World War II. It's actually on HBO Max. And this couple, and they're in love, and they're about to get married, and he goes off to war, and lots of tragedy and lots of complicated family dynamics. So good, so amazing. The camera in The Cranes Are Flying, the camera moves, and I'm not exaggerating, like it has the movement and the energy and the crazy crane shots of something like Euphoria. Like the way that they're flying around crowds and going up over fences and up these staircases, it's nuts. And actually there's even shots in Euphoria that like you could almost, if you put them side by side, you'd be like, hey, I think he saw this movie. And that's not an insult to Euphoria.
And I'm sure it's that he did see that movie.
Yeah, exactly. So The Cranes Are Flying, I think it's on HBO Max. You could probably rent it too. That's my like, some people have heard of it and they're like, shut up, you're pretentious. Everyone's heard of it. And then some people I know have never heard of that movie, and it's really, really great. So that's my like foreign film. Check it out. What's yours? Because I'm curious.
I hate when I get asked these questions, and the worst part is that I have to be the one asking them. So it's a terrible cop-out. I need to think about it, but I will absolutely, okay. All right. I will let you know.
Because it's a fun thing of like, I play this game sometimes with my friends of like, what's a movie that you love that you don't think a lot of people like, that no one's heard of? It's sort of like an artsy, pretentious game, but it can be kind of like, it's fun. It's fun to go down these like esoteric rabbit holes,
I mean, you've got me thinking now, because part of me wants to say something from my youth. And that would be a movie that is not very good and doesn't really have a lot of merits, but at the time spoke to me and helped fuel the reason that I'm sitting here. Part of me wants to just say something that is a favorite, and then immediately I'm thinking Bergman, but then you say everyone knows Bergman. So
but not everyone knows Bergman
because I like patience in art, and I like
I didn't
realism.
watch a Bergman movie until I was 23, so not everybody knows Bergman.
So that's a good place to start.
What's your favorite Bergman?
That's where I don't have my answer, which is why I need to think.
I love Persona. Persona's great.
I wish I don't have the answer. I can tell you that a favorite classic of mine back from when I taught film, Cool Hand Luke. I never get tired of it.
Have not seen that one. I should check that out.
Oh,
I'll add it to my.
I should have just said that. We could have avoided this this silence. Watch
okay.
Cool Hand Luke. I know you will appreciate it. I don't need to say anything more. It's rich in symbolism in very subtle ways, and some not so subtle. So we'll leave it at that, and I will follow up with my favorite Bergman. But I just want to thank you, Stephen, for this insightful glimpse into your experiences and motivations as a storyteller. I could not be happier to be reconnected with you, and I know that we'll stay connected. I'm going to be in LA in a week. So with my family, so we could really have a nostalgic trip. I'll let you know about that. But I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and joining us. I encourage all of you to check out Stephen's work. Links are in the description. And I remind you that this is just one of many in-depth conversations with the future of film. Go to hsfilmfest.com for more information on the All-American High School Film Festival. And please help us out. Subscribe and share across all platforms to support our important community of artists. Stephen, thank you so much.
And before you go, I want to say thank you, Tom, because you have created a network that has facilitated, I think, a lot of people to grow and a lot of people to be artists that maybe wouldn't have gotten to. So what you do is very important too, and you're extremely complimentary of the filmmakers, and I think we all respect that, but you're the man too. You've done a lot for the community and a lot for the world.
Thanks, Stephen. And everyone,
of course,
we'll see you next time.
See ya.